My father didn't pause or hesitate. He didn't look confused or conflicted. On my birthday, with half of Denver's Quinn relatives packed into our backyard, he reached out, tore the crutch from my hand, and barked loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Stop faking it, you're just leeching." The grass rushed up so fast my breath punched out of my lungs. I hit the ground hard on my right side, a shock of pain firing through the base of my spine. Someone laughed, high-pitched, nervous, and eager to belong. Maybe Joanna, maybe Aunt Clara. The sound was contagious. A few more chuckles followed, low and sharp, the kind people use when they think humiliation is funny, as long as it's happening to someone else. I saw legs shifting around me, flip-flops, work boots, grass-stained sneakers. No one bent down, no one offered a hand, not even when I whispered, "Dad, why?" What cut deeper than the fall was the way everyone looked at me like a fraud caught in the act, like they'd been waiting for this moment to prove themselves right about me all along. Even my sister Sabrina stared down with a mix of triumph and disgust, as if she'd been collecting evidence against me for years and finally had her victory. But then a voice came from behind the group. Steady, calm. A voice that didn't belong to any Quinn standing in that yard. A voice that said 6 words that froze them where they stood. "Every step she takes is a miracle." That's when the laughter stopped. Only later would I understand how perfectly timed that moment was, as if God himself had nudged the right person to step forward at the exact second my dignity hit the dirt. Hours earlier, when the day was still warm and hopeful, I had walked into that same yard with a homemade lemon pie balanced in my free hand, and a smile that I hoped looked genuine. I came early, wanting a quiet start before the chaos of relatives' kids and backyard gossip took over. My name is Phoebe Quinn. I'm 30. I spent almost a decade in the Navy before a car accident shattered more than a few vertebrae. It shattered the life I had planned. People assume recovery is linear, that you go to physical therapy, push yourself, get better, and return to normal. But spinal injuries don't care about optimism. Some days I can walk several steps with the crutch barely touching my side. Other days I feel like my spine is made of broken glass. Today was one of the bad ones. But I still showed up. It was Dad's birthday after all, and part of me wanted to believe family could be different, better than the quiet disappointments of the last 2 years. When I arrived, the grill smoke drifted through the yard, kids chased each other around lawn chairs, and country music played through an old Bluetooth speaker somebody had duct-taped together last summer. Dad stood by the grill like a king spatula in one hand, beer in the other. Mom flitted around, topping off sweet tea and avoiding conversations that might drift toward anything uncomfortable, especially my injury. I moved slowly, not wanting attention, but Sabrina spotted me within seconds. She always does. She walked over with that stiff smile she saves for public moments. "You're moving better," she said, her voice sweet but sharp. "Are you sure you still need that crutch?" She didn't ask with concern. She asked like a prosecutor. "I do," I said calmly. "The pain comes and goes." Her eyes narrowed like she was storing ammunition. "Funny, I saw you walking at the clinic last week. Looked fine to me." What she saw was me taking 3 shaky steps during physical therapy, gripping the wall so tightly my knuckles turned white. I nearly collapsed after. But Sabrina never cared about nuance, only about being right. I could tell she was itching for an audience. Unfortunately, backyard birthday parties attract them easily. By the time the grill was hot and the table was full, Sabrina's frustration had simmered into open hostility. She waited until Dad started passing out burgers before she shouted, "She's faking it." Everything stopped. The yard went quiet except for one child dropping a plastic cup. People turned. They always turned toward drama. Sabrina stood with her arms crossed, face-red chest, rising and falling with the thrill of accusation. "She's been pretending for months," she said. "She walks fine when no one's looking." "Right, Andrew. Didn't you see her at the clinic?" Andrew shrugged, but nodded, eager to be part of something. I leaned harder on my crutch, my pulse hammering. "Please don't do this," I said quietly. But she kept going. "She's draining Mom and Dad's money-milking sympathy." Dad turned from the grill, annoyed that the peace of his party was broken. "What's going on?" he asked. "She's lying," Sabrina insisted. "Show them, Phoebe. Show them how hurt you really are." The crowd murmured. A few nodded. Someone whispered, "She does look fine sometimes." I shook my head. I'm not lying. I'm in pain every day. But Sabrina was on fire now, burning up the yard with the confidence of someone who thinks cruelty is honesty. Dad stepped forward, not cautiously, not with concern, but with irritation, annoyed that I dared bring my pain into his perfect afternoon. He reached out and tore the crutch from my hand. That moment felt slow and fast at the same time, like watching yourself fall in a dream but feeling the pain in real life. "Stop faking it," he snapped. "You're just leeching." The ground slammed into me, my teeth rattled. Pain shot straight up my spine, bright and ugly. Laughter followed. Not all at once, just enough to finish breaking me. My own family stood around me like spectators at a circus act gone wrong. And then, that voice. The calm one behind them. "Every step she takes is a miracle." They turned. And standing there in the evening sun was my surgeon. The one man who knew the whole truth about my spine, my pain, and the fight I'd been waging quietly for 2 long years. He saw everything. And he wasn't about to stay silent. For a moment, no one breathed. The backyard just seconds earlier filled with laughter, clinking bottles, and the sizzle of burgers fell into a stunned, heavy silence. Even the kids chasing each other froze mid-step. Every pair of eyes turned toward the man standing behind them. Dr. Stephen Brooks, my spinal surgeon, the one person on this earth who had really seen what my body had been through. He wasn't supposed to be here for another hour. Mom had invited him as a polite gesture, telling him to swing by if you have time, no pressure. But judging by the way he was standing, posture, squared eyes burning through the crowd, he hadn't come for small talk or burgers. He came because he saw me fall. He came because somehow God placed him exactly where I needed him. Sabrina blinked at him like she wasn't sure whether he was real. Aunt Clara's phone, still recording, slowly lowered to her stomach. My father, my proud, stubborn father, shifted uneasily, the spatula in his hand, suddenly looking ridiculous. Dr. Brooks stepped forward, moving with the calm confidence of a man who had held human lives in his hands. He knelt beside me first, not touching me, yet just assessing the way he always did. "Phoebe," he said softly, "can you move your left leg?" I swallowed, feeling the throbbing in my spine growing sharper. "I think so." Slowly. "Good. Don't push it." His voice stayed steady, professional. Then he turned his head toward the relatives behind him, slowly, deliberately, like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. He rose to his feet, dusted off the knees of his slacks, and took 2 steps toward Sabrina. His hand rested gently but firmly on her shoulder. And with the entire Quinn family silent and watching, he repeated the 6 words that cut through the yard like a divine truth. "Every step she takes is a miracle." Sabrina swallowed, her bravado flickered. Dr. Brooks didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His presence carried more weight than any shout. "Do you know what her spine looks like?" he asked, eyes locked onto my sister. "Have you ever seen an MRI after a lumbar burst fracture? Have you seen nerves pressed together like wires someone tied in a knot? Because I have." Dad shifted defensively. "Doctor, we didn't mean." Dr. Brooks held up a hand, stopping him cold. "She underwent one of the most difficult rehabilitation programs I've seen in my 27 years as a surgeon. The fact that she can stand even with assistance is remarkable. I told your family that months ago. I told them again last week. And yet here I am, watching her be accused of faking her own pain." His eyes swept the circle of faces, landing on each one long enough for them to feel the weight of their silence. Aunt Clara looked like she wanted to sink into the soil. Joanna covered her mouth with both hands. Andrew, who'd proudly claimed he saw her walk fine, stared at his sneakers as if praying for the ground to swallow him. Mom was trembling. She reached for Dad's arm, but he pulled away slightly, caught somewhere between shame and stubborn pride. Sabrina tried to speak. I just thought—" "You thought wrong," Dr. Brooks said, his voice low but firm. "And your words caused harm. Real harm." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Let me show you something." He tapped the screen and held the phone out so the crowd could see. A video played, one from my recent therapy session. me gripping the parallel bars, sweat dripping down my forehead, my legs shaking violently with every inch I tried to move. My face contorted with pain, my breaths short, sharp, desperate. 2 steps, barely 2, and then collapsing into his assistant's arms. A collective gasp rippled across the yard. That Dr. Brooks said is what Phoebe looks like when she's walking fine. I turned my face away. I didn't want them to see my tears, not after everything. But I felt them on my cheeks anyway, hot and silent. Dr. Brooks's tone softened, but only barely. If anyone here doubts her condition after seeing this, then the problem isn't Phoebe. It's your inability to accept the truth. Dad's jaw tightened. Doctor, we didn't know it was that bad. Dr. Brooks turned toward him. You didn't want to know. The words didn't shout, they landed like a stone. Mom finally spoke. Stephen, is she getting worse? No, he said gently. But stress, humiliation, violence. His eyes landed pointedly on Dad's hand. The one that had ripped away my crutch can cause setbacks, weeks of lost progress. I saw Dad's shoulders fall a fraction, shame creeping up his neck. Sabrina stepped back, wiping at the corner of her eye. I wasn't trying to hurt her, she whispered. I've been the one helping Mom and Dad. I thought she was taking advantage of. Your sister is a veteran, Dr. Brooks cut in sharply. She gave her health to serve this country. She would give anything not to need that crutch. Silence again. Painfully long. The kind that makes people see their own reflection in the truth. When no one moved, Dr. Brooks exhaled quiet and controlled. Then he turned back to me and knelt again. I think you should go to the ER, he murmured, just for scans, to be safe. I nodded weakly. Mom stepped forward as if to help, but he gently blocked her with his arm. Let me. He lifted me slowly, supporting my weight as if I were made of fragile glass. My best friend Naomi, who had been standing near the picnic table filming everything, rushed toward us, tears in her eyes and fury in her steps. We're going with you, she said, her voice trembling with loyalty. You're not going alone. As they started to guide me toward Dr. Brooks's car, Sabrina took a hesitant step forward. Phoebe, wait, please. I didn't look back. Not yet, not when everything still burned. The yard stayed utterly silent as I left relatives frozen like statues, holding their guilt, their disbelief, their regret. Only when we reached the gate did Dr. Brooks glance back at them and say quietly, She didn't fall today, you dropped her. And that was the last thing any of them heard before the gate closed behind us. The hospital lights always make everything look colder than it is. Too bright, too white, too honest. As Dr. Brooks guided me through the sliding doors, I felt every stare from the waiting room settle on me. My uneven steps, my clenched jaw, the way his arm hovered protectively at my elbow. Naomi stayed close, her hands shaking from a mix of anger and heartbreak. The triage nurse recognized Dr. Brooks immediately. Rough day, she asked quietly. You could say that, he murmured. Possible re-injury, and emotional trauma significant. He hesitated before adding family issue. She nodded like she'd heard that story 100 times. She probably had. They ushered us into a small examination room and everything slowed. My breathing, my thoughts, even the throbbing along my spine. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a deep ache that felt older than the injury, an ache that had more to do with betrayal than bones. When the nurse left, Naomi sat beside me. She took my hand thumb, stroking my knuckles the way she always did when she didn't know what to say. For a long time we stayed like that, still silent, suspended somewhere between the backyard and whatever came next. Finally she whispered, Phoebe, I got everything on video. I closed my eyes. That should have comforted me. Instead, it twisted something inside me. Evidence, proof, backup. Why did I need evidence against my own family? Why did I have to prove my pain to the people who should have protected me the most? Thank you, I said softly, though the words felt small compared to everything she had done. Dr. Brooks returned with my scans. No fractures, he said, relief softening his voice. But you have severe inflammation. This fall could set your progress back a few weeks. Weeks. All that work, all that pain, all that hope. And they had wiped it away with a single accusation. What do I do now, I asked. He pulled up a chair, sitting so his eyes met mine. You focus on healing, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and you put boundaries in place with your family. At the word boundaries, Naomi nodded fiercely. Exactly. Phoebe, they crossed a line today. A big one. I stared at my hands, but they're my family. Family can still cause harm, Dr. Brooks said gently. Family can still be wrong. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to. A soft knock interrupted us. It was the charge nurse holding discharge papers and a pitying look she probably didn't mean to show. But pity wasn't what I wanted. Pity was what Sabrina accused me of chasing. I wanted something simpler, just to be believed. Outside, the night had settled over Denver, cool and quiet, nothing like the chaos earlier. Naomi helped me into the back seat of Dr. Brooks's car. The wheels crunched over gravel as he pulled away from the hospital, and every bump sent a reminder of how hard the fall had been. We didn't talk for the first few minutes. The silence was thick but not uncomfortable, more like a blanket around raw nerves. Finally, Dr. Brooks spoke. Phoebe, I need to ask, has your family treated you like this before? I looked out the window at the passing streetlights. Not like today, but they've doubted me, questioned me, made comments. Naomi scoffed. Comments. They say things behind your back all the time. Your mom tells people you prefer not to walk too much. Your dad says you lean into the sympathy. And Sabrina. Stop, I whispered. It hurt even though I knew it was true. Dr. Brooks tightened his grip on the steering wheel. You don't deserve that, especially after what you've overcome. The ride continued in silence until we reached my apartment building. He pulled into the handicap-accessible spot out front and turned to me. Phoebe, I know you're gentle. I know you try to keep peace. But what happened today wasn't just mean. It was dangerous. And it was illegal. I looked up startled. Illegal? Ripping a mobility aid away from a disabled individual is considered assault in Colorado. What your sister did and what your father enabled wasn't just morally wrong, it was criminal. Naomi nodded. We need to talk to someone, Phoebe, a lawyer, a real one. I felt like the world was tilting again, the same dizzy disorientation I'd felt when I hit the ground earlier. I don't want to destroy my family. Naomi's voice softened. You're not destroying anything, you're protecting yourself. Dr. Brooks reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Her name is Lisa Donovan, Disability Rights. Very good, very fair. I stared at the card like it was something fragile or something dangerous. I don't know if I can do this. You already did the hard part, he said gently. You survived the fall. The rest is about reclaiming your dignity. We helped me upstairs. Naomi stayed with me while I changed into comfortable clothes, wincing at every bruise along my hip and ribs. She made tea, fussing in her gentle, stubborn way. At one point, she stepped into the living room and sighed heavily. Phoebe, your phone's blowing up. My stomach dropped. She held up the screen. 12 missed calls. Texts from Mom. Please call me. From Dad. We need to talk. From Sabrina. I didn't mean for it to go that far. More from relatives trying to control the story before reality settled in. I turned the phone face down. Not tonight, I whispered. Naomi nodded and sat beside me. You don't owe them anything right now. The apartment felt small and safe and warm, so opposite of that backyard filled with suspicion and judgment. I took a long breath and stared at the ceiling, unsure how my life had shifted so drastically in just a few hours. Naomi squeezed my hand. You're not alone. You have me, and Dr. Brooks, and the truth. That's a good start. Later, when the apartment was quiet and Naomi slept on my couch, I sat at my kitchen table with the business card under a warm pool of lamplight. For 2 years, my family had doubted me. Today, they saw what that doubt really looked like. And now I had a choice. I could stay silent, or I could finally speak. With a deep breath, I opened my laptop. I typed the first words of a message to Lisa Donovan. I think I need your help. The email I sent to Lisa Donovan was short and shaky, nothing like the clear reports I used to write in the Navy. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time before finally pressing send. I think I need your help, I wrote. 5 simple words, but they felt heavier than the brace around my back. she replied before I finished my first cup of coffee the next morning. Hi Phoebe, I'm available to talk this afternoon. We'll take this one step at a time. One step at a time. After the way I'd hit the grass at Dad's party, the phrase landed with a sting and a strange kind of comfort. For 2 years it felt like everyone else had set my pace. Now for the first time someone was offering to walk beside me. Naomi insisted on being there. She showed up with that look in her eye that said, "Don't argue with me, I'm staying." When Lisa's face appeared on the screen, she looked exactly how I'd imagined a good lawyer in her 50s might look: neat blazer reading glasses, pushed low calm eyes that had seen uglier things than a family barbecue gone wrong. "Hi Phoebe," she said. "Why don't you tell me what happened in your own words?" So I did. I gave her a quick outline of the accident and the surgeries, enough to explain why I walked with a crutch and why standing still too long felt like balancing on broken glass. Then I told her about the birthday, the invitations, the way I'd convinced myself it might be a fresh start. I told her about Sabrina's comments at the lemonade table about how she said she'd seen me walking fine at the clinic. I described the moment my sister raised her voice, accused me of faking, pointed straight at me like I was on trial in my own backyard. My throat tightened when I repeated my father's words, "Stop faking it, you're just leeching." It was harder to describe the laughter that followed, so I didn't. Naomi did. She told Lisa how long it went on, who had their phones out, how nobody moved until Dr. Brooks stepped forward and said, "Every step she takes is a miracle." Lisa took notes the whole time, only pausing to ask clean, careful questions. "Did anyone try to help you up before your surgeon did?" "No," I said, "no one." "Have family members questioned your disability before this?" "Yes, jokes, little comments, stuff about me liking the attention." "Did your father or sister give you a clear apology afterward?" I thought of the texts I hadn't opened. They said they didn't mean for it to go that far, but they never said they were wrong. She nodded once. "And you use a crutch or other aid every day?" "If I'm on my feet more than a couple of minutes, yes." She set her pen down. "Phoebe, I want you to hear this clearly. What happened to you is not just rude or insensitive. Ripping away a mobility aid from a disabled person can qualify as assault. Doing it in public while accusing you of faking adds harassment and reputational harm. The fall aggravated your condition. This is real measurable harm." The word assault hung in the air between us. It meant we were no longer talking about family drama. We were talking about something the law recognized as wrong. "I don't want to destroy my family," I said. "I just don't want them to be able to do this again. To me or to anyone else." Lisa's expression softened, but her voice stayed firm. "Families usually don't fall apart because someone finally tells the truth," she said. "They fall apart because no one will. Holding them accountable is not an act of hate. It can be an act of protection for you and for whoever might be next." She outlined my options: file a lawsuit and pursue damages for emotional distress and extra medical treatment, ask for a protective order, or start with a formal demand letter, something that laid out exactly what happened, what it cost you, and what needed to happen if they wanted to avoid court. "I work for you," she said. "Nothing moves unless you say so." "Would a letter even matter to them?" I asked. "It usually does," she answered. "People understand weight when they see their actions in writing next to words like injury and liability, and you have something most people in your position don't: clear video and a surgeon willing to testify." Naomi, sitting beside me, crossed her arms. "And none of that goes anywhere without Phoebe's permission." "Exactly," Lisa said. I looked down at the table, seeing the backyard, instead Dad's hand wrenching the crutch away. Sabrina's finger pointed like a weapon the circle of shoes around me as I lay in the grass. The part of me that always tried to smooth things over wanted to let it go. The part that had felt the earth slam into my ribs knew I couldn't. "I think," I said slowly, "I want you to write the letter." Lisa nodded. "I'll draft it this afternoon and send it for your approval." That evening her email arrived. The letter didn't read like a threat. It laid out step by step what had happened in my father's yard. It described my injury in plain medical language. It named my sister's actions for what they were and quoted the parts of Colorado law that applied. At the end it said, "My client is prepared to pursue full legal remedies. However, she is willing to consider a resolution that includes formal written apologies, restitution for medical expenses related to this incident, and a commitment to participate in disability awareness education. Naomi read it and let out a slow whistle. That's going to hit hard. On the phone, Lisa's voice was steady. I won't send it unless you say yes. I thought of the moment my father called me a leech in front of everyone I grew up with. I thought of Sabrina pointing at me like I was a stranger trespassing on my own life. I thought of lying in the grass, realizing that the only person who moved to help me wasn't related to me at all. Yes, I said. My voice didn't shake this time. Send it. The next morning, that letter was sitting in my parents' mailbox, waiting like a truth they couldn't sidestep forever. The letter landed harder and faster than I expected. By noon the next day, my phone lit up with more missed calls than I'd ever seen from my family. Not even when I was injured overseas had they reached out this frantically. But I didn't pick up. Not yet. The old me, the one who apologized first, who tried to keep the peace even when it cost me everything, would have answered immediately. The new me, bruised in body and spirit, but finally standing in her truth, let the calls ring. Late that afternoon the knock came. 3 sharp, urgent taps, not angry, not tentative, something in between. Naomi, sitting on my couch with her laptop, looked up. Don't answer if you don't want to, she whispered. But I already recognized the rhythm. It was my mother's knock, the same one she used when I was 16 and locked myself in my room after fighting with Sabrina over some forgotten slight. I opened the door only halfway. Mom stood there, eyes, red hair frazzled, clutching the letter Lisa had written. She'd folded and unfolded it so many times it looked like a damp tissue. For a moment she didn't speak. She just stared at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time, all the pain, all the years I tried to hide the worst parts from them. Phoebe, her voice cracked. What is this? What is happening to our family? I felt Naomi step quietly behind me, a presence, but not a barrier. I kept my hands on the doorframe, steadying myself. What's happening, I said softly, is what happens when the truth finally comes out. Mom swallowed. Your father is beside himself. He says this is too much, that you didn't have to do this. Heat flushed up my chest. I didn't have to, Mom. He ripped the crutch out of my hand and called me a leech. In front of everyone. I could have been seriously injured. Her chin trembled. He didn't mean to hurt you. That's the problem, I said. He didn't even think. We stood in a long silence, the hallway filled with unspoken years. Finally, Mom whispered, Your sister is a mess. She hasn't stopped crying since she read the letter. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because crying was the first honest reaction Sabrina had shown in years. Still, I kept my voice steady. Her tears don't erase what she did. No, Mom said quietly. No, they don't. Something shifted then, subtle but real. For the first time, she wasn't defending Sabrina. She wasn't smoothing over the edges. She wasn't trying to protect the family's image. She was just acknowledging the truth. When you send something like this, she said softly, lifting the letter, it changes things. I know, I replied. That's why I sent it. She looked startled, as if expecting me to waver, but I didn't. Mom closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. When she opened them, her voice was steadier. Your father wants to talk to you. Sabrina, too. Please, Phoebe. Can't we just sit down together, just to talk? I felt Naomi move beside me. Phoebe, she murmured, you don't have to decide right now. Mom looked at her, startled. I'm her mother. And I'm her friend, Naomi replied, and she's been hurt, badly. Mom pressed her lips together. I know, and we need to fix that. Her honesty, that single sentence, we need to fix, that broke something open in me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the faintest crack in the wall around my heart. I'll meet with you, I said finally, all of you, but not alone. Mom nodded, of course. And not at the house, I added, somewhere neutral. She thought for a moment. Pastor Reed said we could use one of the meeting rooms at church. He knows something happened. He's worried. I blinked. Pastor Reed knows. She flushed. Your Aunt Clara has a loose mouth. Of course she did. Still, the church was neutral ground, and something about meeting there felt right, somewhere quiet, somewhere God could hear us if we forgot how to hear each other. Okay, I said, tomorrow. Mom sagged with relief, as if she'd been holding her breath since she walked in. She reached out as if to touch my arm, then hesitated. I appreciated the hesitation. It meant she was finally learning to respect space. "I'm glad you're willing to talk," she whispered. I nodded and she left. When the door closed, Naomi let out a breath. "You handled that better than I would have." "I don't want revenge," I said, "just accountability." She squeezed my shoulder. "And you'll get it, on your terms." The next afternoon, Naomi drove me to the church meeting room. A soft rain had started falling, tapping gently against the windshield like a steady metronome for my thoughts. I wasn't nervous. I'd felt too much pain in the last week for nerves, but I was unsettled, like walking into a place where the truth had teeth. The room Pastor Reed lent us was quiet, carpeted with soft lighting, and a round table in the middle. A Bible sat open near the window like someone had been reading it moments before. My family was already there. Dad sat rigid in his chair, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Mom hovered beside him, eyes watching me with something between worry and hope. And Sabrina, my sister, who had pointed at me like a criminal, looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Eyes, swollen shoulders, curled inward fingers, twisting a tissue into shreds. No one spoke as I entered. Naomi pulled out a chair for me and we sat. For a moment, the only sound was the rain. Then Sabrina broke. "Phoebe," she whispered, her voice cracking open, "I'm so sorry." She didn't defend herself. She didn't blame stress or miscommunication. She didn't justify a thing. "I was jealous," she confessed, "of your service, of how proud Mom and Dad used to be of you. I hated feeling invisible. I hated being the one stuck here while you were out there doing something important. And I took it out on you. And that's God, Phoebe, that's not who I want to be." Tears rolled down her face, and she didn't hide them this time. Dad cleared his throat, voice stiff. "I overreacted. I shouldn't have touched your crutch. I shouldn't have said what I said." I waited. He swallowed. "I was wrong." The words landed heavily, clumsily, but honestly. Mom reached for my hand. I'm sorry, too, for staying silent. For the first time in years, they weren't pretending. They were looking at their own ugliness straight on. I felt something loosen inside me, not forgiveness, but space for it. And I knew this wasn't over, but it was a beginning. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Their apologies hung in the air like fragile glass, real, trembling, unexpected. I had imagined this meeting 100 different ways, but not like this. Not with my sister breaking down before a round table inside a quiet church, not with my father gripping the edge of his chair like he was afraid he might fall through it. Not with my mother's hand resting over mine, warm and shaking. Pastor Reed sat in the corner, silent, respectfully present. He hadn't been asked to intervene, only to let us borrow the space. But the way he watched us, calm, patient, prayerful, grounded the moment in a way none of us could have done alone. Naomi stayed beside me, her presence steady as bedrock. I felt her hand hover near my back, not touching, just there ready to catch me if words turned painful. Finally, I inhaled slowly. "I appreciate your apologies," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "But this isn't only about what happened at the barbecue. It's about everything that came before it. Years of doubt, years of comments, years of feeling like I had to defend my own pain." Sabrina wiped her cheeks, nodding desperately. I know, Phoebe, and I hate myself for it." "Don't hate yourself," Pastor Reed murmured gently. "Hate the choices. They can change. You can change. That's what repentance is." She let out a shaky breath like the word itself pierced something inside her. Dad finally looked up. His eyes were red, not from crying, not yet, but from holding back emotions he wasn't used to letting out. "I was raised to believe weakness was a choice," he said quietly. My father drilled that into me. I thought I was being tough. I thought I was pushing you to fight harder. Naomi let out a small sound, half disbelief, half frustration, but she stayed silent. Dad continued, "But I wasn't pushing. I was hurting you. And I didn't see it until that doctor showed up." The image flashed again, Dad ripping my crutch away, the ground slamming toward me, laughter ringing in my ears. I swallowed hard. "I gave the Navy everything I had," I said softly. "You always told people how proud you were of me when I served. But after the accident, when I came home broken, that's when I needed you most. And that's when you pulled away." Dad's mouth tightened, guilt carving deep lines in his face. "I didn't know how to help you." "I didn't expect you to fix me," I said. "Just to believe me, to stand by me, to not accuse me of faking it." The room stilled. It was Mom who finally whispered the truth that tied all of it together. We were afraid. I turned to her. She continued, voice trembling. We didn't understand your pain. We didn't know what to say. And instead of learning, instead of listening, we avoided it. We avoided you. There it was. Fear masquerading as judgment. Silence hiding as indifference. The admission hurt, but it also unlocked something long buried, a piece of the puzzle I never had. I want us to heal, Mom said, tears welling. But I know we can't skip the part where we face what we've done. That was the first time I believed she understood. The pastor nodded approvingly. Truth first, then reconciliation. That's the order. Sabrina leaned forward, voice small. Phoebe, what do you want us to do? Tell us, please. I glanced at Naomi, who gave me a tiny nod. Lisa's words echoed, too. Justice is yours to pursue. Mercy is also yours to give. I took a slow breath. I'm not dropping the letter, not after everything. There has to be accountability, but I'm not trying to ruin anyone's life. I just want change. Dad swallowed. What does that look like? I want written apologies, I said. Honest ones, not excuses. I want bare truth on paper, for me to keep, forever. They all nodded. I want you. I looked at Dad and Sabrina to attend a disability awareness program. Learn what chronic pain really is. Learn about invisible conditions. Learn how easily words can injure someone already fighting every day. Mom's fingers tightened around mine. We'll do it. All of us. And I want restitution for the medical treatment I need because of the fall, I continued. Not to punish you. Just to take responsibility. My recovery can't be set back because of what happened. Dad lowered his head. That's fair. And my voice softened. I want space. I need time before I can trust you again. Trust has to come slowly. Sabrina wiped her eyes again. We'll give you all the space you need. Just don't give up on us. I stared at her, really stared. For the first time, she didn't look like the loud, combative sister who always had something to prove. She looked like a woman finally seeing the cracks in her own armor. She looked human, broken, trying. I'm not giving up, I said quietly, but I'm not rushing back either. The relief on her face nearly broke me. Pastor Reed folded his hands. Phoebe, is there anything else? I hesitated. The last piece wasn't about justice. It wasn't about law or boundaries. It was about something deeper, something spiritual. I want all of you to pray with me, I said. Shock flickered across Sabrina's face. Dad tensed. Mom gasped softly. Even Naomi blinked at me in surprise. Not for forgiveness, I clarified. Not yet. I'm not there. But for clarity, for strength, for this family to learn to do better. Pastor Reed smiled quietly. That, he said, is a holy request. He stood, placing a hand on my shoulder, inviting the others to rise. One by one, hesitant, humbled, trembling, they joined hands around the table. The pastor began to pray softly. Lord, let truth be the beginning, not the end. Let humility do its work. Let those who harmed seek repair. Let those who hurt find healing. And let this family learn to choose compassion over pride. Sabrina cried openly. Mom squeezed my hand. Dad let out a shaky breath that sounded like a lifetime of stubbornness cracking open. As the prayer closed, something shifted in the room. Gentle, quiet, real. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the first step toward it. A step none of us could have taken without truth. Without boundaries. Without the fall that exposed everything. And without the grace that comes after. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet, like the air after a long storm, still heavy but no longer violent. I wasn't healed, not physically, not emotionally, not spiritually. But something inside me had shifted, like the ground had steadied beneath my feet. The meeting at the church didn't fix everything, but it cracked open a door I once believed was sealed shut. Lisa filed the agreement we discussed: formal apologies, medical restitution, and a commitment to attend disability awareness programs. My family didn't fight it. They signed where they needed to sign. They scheduled the classes. And for the first time in my adult life, Sabrina didn't argue, didn't defend herself, didn't twist the story to make herself the hero. She accepted the consequences. That alone was a miracle of its own. I didn't speak to them much afterward. Not out of anger, but because my heart needed quiet. needed space, needed the kind of stillness where wounds breathe instead of fester. During those quiet days, I poured my time into therapy, both the physical kind and the kind that happens when you sit across from someone who asks you the hard questions. What do you want your life to look like now? What part of yourself did the accident steal? Which part is still alive? My therapist, a retired Army nurse named Dana, told me something I'll never forget. Pain is a teacher, Phoebe, but it's a terrible roommate. Don't let it move in permanently. Her words settled into me the way truth does, soft but unshakable. At the same time, my blog began to grow. Slowly at first, then faster than I expected. People from all over the country, veterans, widows, folks with chronic pain, caregivers, people estranged from their families wrote to me. They thanked me for saying the things they'd never had the courage to tell their own loved ones. One message stood out. It came from a Vietnam veteran named Carl. He wrote, "Your story reminded me of something my chaplain told me in '69. Sometimes God lets the truth break you before it builds you, not to punish you, to position you." I read that line 3 times, then I cried. Because that's exactly what it felt like, the fall, the humiliation, the video, the meeting at church. It all broke me open so something new could take root. A part of me that had been silent for years started to speak again. Not the part that wanted approval, the part that wanted purpose. 3 months later, I got a call from Dr. Brooks. "Can you come by the rehab center tomorrow?" he asked. "There's someone I want you to meet." When I arrived leaning carefully on my crutch, I found him standing beside a young woman in her 20s. She wore a brace around her torso, and fear in her eyes, the same fear I used to carry with me everywhere. "This is Jenna," Dr. Brooks said softly. "She's just starting rehab. She doesn't believe she'll ever walk again." I stepped closer, offering her the gentlest smile I could. I didn't believe it either. Jenna blinked, startled. "But you're walking." "Barely," I laughed. And very slowly, "But yes, and you will too. Maybe not today, maybe not the way you expect, but you'll get farther than you think." Her eyes filled the way mine used to when someone spoke hope into my darkness. Dr. Brooks gave me a quiet nod, the kind that said, "This is why I asked you here." And I understood. Healing isn't just about getting stronger, it's about giving strength too. As summer turned to fall, my family kept their promise. Dad attended his classes, sitting stiff-backed in a metal chair, while an instructor explained what chronic pain actually does to a person's life. He called me afterward, voice rough, and said I wish I'd known all this sooner. Mom began advocating at her church, gently correcting people who made thoughtless comments about disability. Pastor Reed told me she'd become one of the most thoughtful voices in their support groups. And Sabrina, perhaps the biggest surprise of all, began volunteering at the rehab center every Saturday. At first, she worked quietly in the background, folding towels, preparing water bottles, but eventually she moved toward helping the patients directly. She told me later, eyes brimming. Seeing what people go through, it humbled me. We didn't rush reconciliation. It came in small pieces. Like the first time she texted me a photo of her volunteer badge, or the day she asked for a reading list about spinal trauma, or the afternoon she admitted I never realized how much strength it takes just to live with pain. Little steps, small miracles. One at a time. The turning point came in late October. Naomi and I had just finished reorganizing my living room when the knock came again, soft, hesitant. Without opening the door fully, I peeked out. It was Dad. He looked older than I remembered, maybe because he wasn't wearing his stubbornness like armor. He held a folded piece of paper in one hand and an envelope in the other. "Phoebe," he said quietly, Can I talk to you for a minute?" Naomi squeezed my hand and slipped into the other room, giving us space. I stepped aside, letting Dad in. He sat on the couch, hands shaking slightly. "I finished my part of the restitution," he said, holding up the envelope. "But the money isn't the important part." He unfolded the paper. It was his apology letter, not the formal one he owed me, a different one, longer, messier, real. He read it aloud. Every sentence cracked something open, old wounds, old anger, old disappointments I didn't even know I was still carrying. He talked about his father, about pride, about fear. He talked about the moment I fell, how the sound of my body hitting the ground still haunted him. And then he said something that made my throat tighten. I don't know if God gave me a daughter strong enough to survive the Navy, or if He gave the Navy a daughter strong enough to survive me. But I'm grateful you're still here." When he finished, tears rolled down his cheeks, tears I'd never seen in my entire life. "Can you ever forgive me?" he whispered. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight and truth of the moment settle in. "I'm working on it," I said softly, "and today helps." He nodded, relieved and humbled. And for the first time since the accident, he opened his arms not out of pity or guilt or obligation, but out of love. I stepped into them, and this time he held me up instead of letting me fall. When I finally shared my story on my blog about the barbecue, the fall, the truth, the consequences, the healing, I ended it with the message I now leave for you. Pain changes us. But so does grace. Families break. But truth can rebuild them slowly, honestly, humbly. And sometimes when life knocks us down, God sends the right person to lift us back up. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched something in your heart, if it reminded you of someone you love or someone you're still struggling to forgive, feel free to share it or drop a comment. Your story might be the lifeline someone else needs. And if you'd like to hear more stories of resilience, redemption, and the quiet power of truth, don't forget to subscribe. 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 To subscribe.